Okay, so what's Syria's game? Syria's game, when Syria looks out, they have hope. They're not going to give up the Golan. Why do they get hope? The Northern Alliance. They see Syria puts great stock in improving relations with Turkey and its hopes for an emerging Northern Alliance, linking Iran, Turkey, Iraq, Lebanon in a trade and increasingly military alliance that can pressure Israel. And they've announced that they're dropping visa requirements with Lebanon, Iraq, and Turkey. Iran is trying to get folded into this. Turkey took the occasion of the Egyptian Intifada to announce this $30 billion ongoing deal with Iran and to say, screw you to America. We're not going to cut our relations with Iran. And they're trying to fold Iran into this. Iran and Iraq and Syria have just been talking about opening new pipelines that go from Iran right across Iraq to Syria to get all this oil back and forth. That's Syria's hope for development and progress. And Syrian officials will regularly tell you, oh, the Turks, you know what they're saying bad things about Israel in the open press, but you should hear what they say to us. Turkey has changed, and they're going to be with us. Now, what were the headlines when Egypt Intifada took place? The headlines scrolling across the bottom of the Syrian TV for 3 days were the end of the Camp David regime. For Syria, it's all about Golan. The end of the Camp David regime. They see this, what's happening in Egypt, as an incredible boost for them. Same with Tunisia. They're all going to, because democracy is going to help the Syrian position. Why? Because all Arabs are mad. They don't like it. El-Baradei comes out and says a few days ago, we will never return to our master-slave relationship with Israel. He calls it a master-slave relationship. Hillary Clinton tried to see this morning the youth leadership of the revolution. They said they would not meet with her. Why? Because you support Israel and because the other thing was Israel-related. We won't meet with you because of Israel. That's the youth leadership. That's the future of Egypt. Even if they don't come to power, that's the voice. So Syria's excited. Syria sees this as a growing voice, that democracy is bad for America in the region. Now, you can say, okay, as I'm sure many people will, let's wait. Maybe Syria will blow apart, right? Maybe the Syrian regime will have a revolution, and therefore you will change Syria too, that Syria will be hoisted on the same petard that Egypt and Tunisia was. And of course, there's a sort of an effort to get that rolling. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I think this intifada in many ways is good for Syria. Syria has announced in the last few days that it has given an order that all Kurds, stateless Kurds in the northeast of the country, should be given the same rights as Syrians. That means they can go to school. That means they can get jobs. That means they can do things. Syria is taking this seriously. And I think many Syrian officials are encouraging Assad to use this new democracy wave to get ahead. Don't stay behind. Don't do what the Saudis are doing and the Bahrainis. Get ahead of this. Use this as an excuse to make some important reforms. And Assad said, the reason this isn't happening in Syria is because I'm close to people. He wants to be close to people. He sees that as the way to avoid this. And I think, well, we can hope that he will use it in order to press some reforms. He just announced last week that the government will pay for jobs in the private sector for any firm that employs a new person in the private sector for 1 year. That's paying to subsidizing the private sector in Syria. This isn't for this public sector, creating jobs in the public sector, which has always been the way. He's going to try to subsidize. Now, these are, at least the capitalist ones, are still fairly superficial. The Kurdish one is important because it gives Kurds what they've been demanding for a long time. It doesn't give them citizenship, but it gives them the rights of citizens. We will see how far this goes forward. And we've seen these incipient little demonstrations in Damascus, which are good and which should give the Assad regime a real scare. But on that note, let me come to an end here and just conclude and say that Syria is the easy way to move forward. If America sticks with Israel and doesn't try to solve this Arab-Israeli conflict, it's going to run into a severe forward winds in the Middle East. And it's going to have to make the decision whether it's going to support Israel against Egypt or against Bahrain or against Saudi Arabia. And it shouldn't be in that position. Or against Turkey. Turkey is so much more important. America should be friends with Turkey. America should not be at daggers drawn with Iran. Oh, Iran relations won't be good, but it shouldn't be at this level where it's forcing all of its allies, India, so forth, China, to cut relations with Iran. Okay, and that's the way I will leave it. This is the easiest way to step forward and for America to make headway, because otherwise it's going to find itself with very few friends in the Middle East and having lost what it's built up over decades of hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Andrew, please.
Thanks very much to the Middle East Institute for the invitation today, to my good friend Kate Seeley, and thanks also to Josh for agreeing to today's talk. Luckily, we had great weather and we have a great turnout, which over the last few weeks, as everything, the winds of change have swept over the Arab world, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of focus on Syria. In fact, for the first time in a long time at the Washington Institute, I felt kind of lonely, which over the last 2 years it's been anything but. For as glad as I'm to be here today, I think it's a bit sad that this event's taking place in the shadow of the Assad regime's crackdown on a series of peaceful protests in Syria. Today, around 100 people, mostly relatives of political prisoners, gathered in Marja Square in front of the Interior Ministry and called for the release of their loved ones. It was very brutally put down, and up to 30 were arrested. And I think the list of names is circulating among human rights activists. I think this is particularly relevant. I guess I'm going to focus my comments mostly on these winds of change. I think a lot of you know that the time I spent in Syria, I did not overwhelmingly focus on the Syrian opposition. But when I did, it caused me a lot of trouble. And the Assad regime is particularly sensitive about any kind of criticism about its domestic affairs. And however, what I learned from working with the Syrian opposition there in terms of reporting on what is still called the Damascus Declaration changed my thinking significantly, not only on Syria, but also the prospects for some kind of peaceful landing between its regime and its people.